Don't forget to subscribe to my channel, and while you're at it, click the bell to be notified of future videos. This block is Richmond Variation. There's another block we had in April that was called Richmond. It finishes at 12 inches, and this block is a little bit different. Here's the diagram. We're going to make cat's cradle units in the four corners and square on point, but these will be 4 patches on point, and then a large square in the center. Here are 4 blocks set block to block, and we have 5 patches. Patch A is a 2-inch finished square. We cut 2.5-inch squares, and we'll need 4 patches of the light accent fabric. Here are the Accuquilt dies you can use, and the Accuquilt dies are here for all but the very last patch. Patch B is a 2-inch finished half square triangle. We cut 2 7/8-inch squares, cut them in half once diagonally for 2 patches, and we need 24 patches. These patches go in the square on point and also in the cat's cradle. Patch C is a 4-inch finished half square triangle. We cut 4 7/8-inch squares, cut them in half once diagonally for 2 patches, and we need 4 patches of the light accent fabric. These go in the cat's cradle. It's the large triangle. Patch D is a 4-inch finished square. This goes in the center. We cut a 4.5-inch square, and we need 1 patch. And finally, patch E is a 1 3/8-inch finished square, so this is a very odd size. You can cut patches, and we'll need 8 of each, or I'm going to show you how you can strip piece these 4 patches. It's just a little bit faster. We'll cut 2 from each fabric. We'll cut 1 strip that's 1 7/8 inches wide by about 16 inches long, and this will give you extra fabric. Here are the fabrics I've chosen. This is kind of a lime green and dark blue, navy blue. Patch A, and I'm using low volume print for the background, which is patch B, and this is patch C for the cat's cradle, and this is the patch D for the middle, and these are for the 4 patch units. So step 1 says we'll start with the 4 patch units. We'll take these 2 strips and stitch them together like this. Stitch them this way, and then press the seams open, and we'll subcut them into segments. Done our strip piecing, now we're going to cut them into segments, 1 7/8-inch segments. When I cut triangles using the 7/8 measurement, I use this ruler called Simple 7/8 ruler, and I haven't had it that long, but it's been a very good ruler if you cut a lot of triangles. 1 7/8, 2 7/8, 3 7/8. It goes up to 5 7/8 this way, and 10 7/8 this way. So I'll have a link in the description if you want to check it out, but I've been very pleased with this ruler because I do cut a lot of triangles. First, trim off this edge. Now we're going to cut 8 segments at 1 7/8. When I subcut these, I put one of the horizontal lines of the ruler right along the seam line, so I make sure it's lined up, and then I line up the edge of the fabric. Okay, now we'll take these, and we need to make 4 4-patch units. We just sew them together like this and press the seams open. Next, we'll take our 4 patches and turn them into a 4-patch on point. This is what makes it on point, like this. I like to stitch opposite sides first, press them, and then stitch the other side and press them. If you're not familiar with piecing a square on point, stay tuned for a short tutorial that shows you how to do this. You have your 4 half square triangles that go on the corners, and your large square in the center that's set on point. I like to start by piecing opposite sides first. And what I do is flip this over, center the square on the triangle, matching these edges, the long edge of the triangle and one side of the square. You want to see if these triangles over here on the right and here on the left are roughly the same size. You just kind of eyeball it. So there, I'm going to go with that. Stitch 1/4 inch from this edge, 1/4 inch seam allowance all the way down. Do this side as well. Press your seams open, and if you look, these edges extend here, and what I'm going to do now is just trim these off straight in line with the side of the square. Put your half square triangle down with the right side facing up, and then place this in the center, and then check the size of your triangles overhanging here. And what you're going to do here, you will start stitching right here in this V section where this point meets. And this should be 1/4 inch from here to the edge of this fabric. Start here, stitch 1/4 inch all the way to this side, and you should come out here at the same part on this side. And do that on both sides. And here's what the stitching looks like. And now you're going to press your seams open. And here's the finished unit. Now just trim off these little nubs on the sides. And your unit's finished. Piecing the square on point using Accuquilt. I like to start by piecing opposite sides first. And you're going to place the half square triangle piece on top. We need to center it. I just kind of eyeball it, and I'm looking at this little triangle of the bottom fabric poking out here. You can barely see it. It's a little triangle poking out here, and then on the other side there's a little triangle poking out here. What you want to do is try to get them as close to the same size as possible. So I'm just kind of shifting it a little bit. And you're going to take it to your machine, and your 1/4 inch should be right here at this point. So you stitch from this point 1/4 inch all the way down, and you come off at this point. And it's more important that you have the 1/4 inch than if you're exactly on the point. And you'll do that for both sides, this side and then this opposite side. Press your seams open. Now we'll flip it over and do the other two sides. You take your triangle, and now you have sides that you can match. You see the triangle has the points cut off. These points are going to line up with what we just sewed. So if you look here, you see they line up with this edge, these two edges, here, here, and across the top. Now you'll stitch 1/4 inch from that point here all the way down to this other point, and do that to both sides. It's really difficult to see this stitching because I used white thread, but you can see it coming out here, this little tag here, and over here. If these don't match perfectly, if it's like it's not long enough, don't stretch this triangle because you'll just make the unit wonky. Just center it as much as you can and stitch 1/4 inch. Now we'll just press it open and it will be finished. And there's your finished unit. At some point when you finish your square on point unit, you'll have to sew something else to it. And you want to keep these points nice and sharp. And sometimes you might be matching it to a seam line or a plain piece of fabric or maybe another point. And I'm going to show you how to keep these points nice. If you've pressed your seam open, you will see where these three fabrics intersect and form a point right here. That's your point on the back, and it's also your point on the front. So you can stitch with this part on top, and you'll be able to make sure that your point stays there. I take a pin and put it right there at the point, and then pick it up on this back side. And in this case, I'm going to come down about 1/4 inch and then put that right in the seam line. That way the point will end up right on the seam line. Put your fabric pieces together and line up the top edges, or the edges that you need to line up. And make sure your pin is perpendicular, goes straight down into the fabric, like that. If you're at an angle like this, your points won't match. So make sure they're straight, perpendicular to the fabric, and then put it into the fabric. When you start sewing, line up these edges here. Start at your 1/4 of an inch and sew all the way down, and you're going to aim for this point where that pin goes into the fabric, and you'll know that you're matching the point and the seam line on the back. And straighten your bottom edge again and continue stitching 1/4 of an inch off. And here's what the stitching looks like if you can barely see it on here with this thread. It goes right across here, leaving the point open. You're not stitching over the point. And then if I flip it over, you'll see it's not exactly 1/4 of an inch there, but that doesn't matter, because what you want is the point to match the seam allowance here. Now just press the seam open and you're finished. Step 3, we're going to start the cat's cradle unit. We'll take the square, which is patch A, and 2 of these patch B triangles. For the first step, I always look at the diagram here. So I'm going to lay the pieces out just like the diagram is. See, it matches the diagram. And what you're doing is making a big triangle. You'll start by sewing one of these triangles, flip it over, and you'll need to match this edge and this edge, and then stitch your 1/4 of an inch here and press your seam open. We have half of the triangles ready, and we'll just take the other one like this, flip it over, and you'll want to match this edge and that edge, and then stitch your 1/4 of an inch and press your seams open. And when you do that, it will look like this. And after you do this, you take your C-patch and we're going to stitch it like this. Fold it over and match all 3 sides as much as you can. If you flip this over and just try to match all the sides, even them out a little bit so it'll lay flat. And when you get to this point here, you're going to stitch on the long side of the triangle. And when you get here, you want to stitch right above that point so you don't cut the points off, and then continue stitching all the way down. I have this cut off because I cut these little triangles with the Accuquilt, so those are cut off. Then when you finish that and press your seams open, this is what it will look like. If you have some nubs, you'll need to cut those off. We have all of our units ready, so we'll just look at the diagram and lay the block out. We check to make sure everything's in order, and we'll sew the top units together into a row, the middle and the bottom. Press the seams, then sew the rows together. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to my channel, and while you're at it, click the bell to be notified of future videos.